Hello and welcome to my humble kitchen. I'm Chef Amy Symington. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about ways we can up the flavor in things without added salt, sugar, and unhealthy fats. So 5 ways to increase the flavor in your favorite foods. And so basically I have 5 ingredients that you really want to focus on to get that kind of oomph of flavor that you're looking for without all those unhealthy ingredients that we do not want because they increase our risk of chronic disease. So first and foremost, I really like to focus on spices and herbs, okay? So spices and herbs, so things like dried herbs in particular. So cinnamon, cumin is actually my favorite spice, coriander, chili, paprika, it's endless. There are so many different types of dried spices, and not only are they good for oomping flavor, but they're also rich in antioxidants. And so that's a good part of an anti-inflammatory diet, so please get lots of those into you. In addition to the spices, also the dried herbs provide high levels of flavor, but also high levels of antioxidants as well. So it's kind of like a win-win situation here. You're getting the flavor, but you're also getting some nutritional benefit as well. Okay, so spices and herbs, number 1. Number 2. Citrus. So we're talking grapefruit, limes, lemons, oranges, and not only the citrus juice, but also the zest. The zest is actually where the majority of the flavor lies within the citrus fruit. And so it's always a good idea if you're using any sort of juice in any recipes to save the zest as well. So you can toss it in your freezer and use it in things like soups, stews, muffins, cookies, cakes, whatever you're making. Honestly, there's a citrus fruit for that. Number 3, ginger and garlic. So ginger is great in things like smoothies, curries, soups, stews, and again, it gives an oomph of flavor without added fat, salt, or sugar. It also contains a powerful antioxidant called gingerol, which is a good component of an anti-inflammatory diet. In addition to that, garlic, I say put garlic in everything. Not only does it give a good oomph of flavor, but it also is very good for us as well. Good component of an anti-inflammatory diet. And you can put that in dressings, soups, stews, casseroles, whatever, everything. In addition to that, I like to throw in onions as well, but ginger and garlic are really flavorful. Onions are also a good one as well. Number 4, vinegar. So you've got red vinegar, you've got white wine vinegar, you've got apple cider vinegar, you've got rice vinegar. The list of vinegars goes on and on and on and on. And you can put that in things like dressings, obviously, but you can also add them to the end of things like soups and stews. So for example, if you were making, say, like something with red beans, a red vinegar would go really nicely with that. Again, gives an oomph of flavor. I also like to use vinegars if I don't have citrus fruit. So in something like a soup or a stew, if it does need a little bit more acid to balance the flavors, I'll sometimes, if I don't have any citrus, I'll use vinegar. And I usually try to use a fairly neutral one, so something like apple cider is a good one. And then number 5, which is my favorite, is fresh herbs. Okay, so cilantro, dill, basil, mint, whatever you have. Very flavorful, but also contains nutrients and health benefits as well. So things like, well, they're leafy greens essentially, so they contain things like iron, obviously high fiber as well, all sorts of vitamins and minerals. So get those into you as much as possible. And they also increase flavor too. So those are the kind of things I go to first before I reach for my salt shaker, okay? And so that's what we're gonna try and do today. So practically applying that nutrition information for you, we're gonna demo 3 recipes today. So 3 different ways that you can kind of utilize those 5 hot tips that I just gave you in your daily cooking. The first recipe on the menu that we're gonna be making today is a red borscht. So it's winter right now. And so we're trying to use up all those beautiful root vegetables, but also again, making sure that it's super flavorful. So we'll be using a lot of citrus as well as herbs to do that. The second recipe that we're going to be making is a salad. It has cabbage and pears. It's kind of I refer to it as a winter coleslaw. So a winter coleslaw with an orange vinaigrette dressing. So again, utilizing those 5 hot tips that I just listed off for you. And it's such a flavorful salad. And also very beautiful. And then the third recipe that we're going to be demoing is a ginger lemon mint slushy. So basically I just listed up all the ingredients that are going to go into that, and it's so flavorful, it's so refreshing, and it's kind of like a nice treat at the end of a meal or quick snack, or if you're having kind of something that you want, you know, a little sweet tooth craving, it's a good substitute for that and very refreshing. And also again, we're utilizing citrus as well as fresh herbs as well as ginger. So we're getting 3 of the 5 out of the hot tips into that recipe. Okay, great, so we're gonna get started. So first we're gonna start with the red borscht. So get this heated up. So it's about a medium-high heat. Okay. And I should mention that all of the recipes that we're demoing today are coming from the Long Table Cookbook, Plant-Based Recipes for Optimal Health, which is my book. I'm a published author, as well as a nutrition professor, chef, and a researcher here at a local college. And then I also work for a not-for-profit cancer organization. So the college that I work for, George Brown College, and the not-for-profit I work for, Gilda's, and myself teamed up and we collaborated on this cookbook. So all my author proceeds go to support the cancer organization that I work for. So you'll note all the recipes today we're utilizing whole plant-based foods, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, whole grains, and then good quality plant-based protein. Okay, kind of following Canada's food guide for the most part, okay? So, borscht, this is heated up, wonderful. First I'm gonna toss in some grapeseed oil. I like grapeseed oil, it's a monounsaturated fat, and it also has a higher smoke point. It doesn't become carcinogenic, it doesn't smoke as easily, and it also has a neutral flavor. And so when we're cooking, we try to use oils that don't smoke as easily. Okay, so grapeseed oil you could also use if you wanted a little bit of flavor. Sesame oil, peanut oil, avocado oil is another good neutral one. Those are good ones that have a higher smoke point. Okay, while that's going, we are going to chop up an onion. Okay, so if you've never cut an onion before, this is how you do it. We take our onion, we cut the end off, we save all of the skins and the ends. Obviously they have to be clean because we like to use them for our stock, which I've made ahead of time for us today. So we're cutting through the onion without cutting through the root. It's kind of holding it intact so that it's easy to dice. And then I did a horizontal cut, and then we're just chopping through, all the while keeping our fingers kind of in the shape of a claw. Okay, speed before accuracy, or accuracy before speed, I mean. So the more you practice, the faster you'll get. Okay, while that's still heating up, I'm going to do the garlic as well. So I've got about 3 cloves. The recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of garlic. You can put as little or as much as you want in this recipe, pretty much. It's very forgiving. If you can't have onions and garlic, that's okay. There's 4 other methods you can get extra flavor without the use of onions and garlic. If they don't agree with you, or if you don't consume them for religious reasons. Should mention the borscht recipe that we're doing today is actually a recipe 2 of my students created. A traditional recipe that she would eat at home. So I always love that. Trying to use up obviously local seasonal ingredients as much as possible, but just cooking what you know makes oftentimes for the best cuisine. Okay, so we've got our onions and our garlic. We'll toss those in. Great. This is what I like to refer to as flavor country. Onions and garlic. Great. Okay, celery is next. Okay, and this recipe actually calls for leeks. I didn't have any leeks on hand. Leeks are also a great way to add additional flavor too. Same with just mirepoix in general, so celery, carrots, and onions. So I'm just using an extra piece of celery instead of the leeks. But this recipe really does utilize all of the kind of winter vegetables or the fall vegetables. Next up, about 1/4 of a large red cabbage. You could use green if you didn't have red on hand. Red is nice, it's so beautiful, and it's also very rich in anthocyanins, which is a powerful antioxidant. Again, good for an anti-inflammatory diet. Cabbage is so great, it's inexpensive, keeps for a long time in the fridge, and you can use it in so many things. Soups, stews, stir fries, salads. It's so versatile and it's very, very, very affordable. Okay. So the onions are starting to turn translucent. That's when you want to add the celery as well as the cabbage. Plop that in and give it a stir. Great. And then next up wouldn't be borscht without beets. Okay, beets are such a great addition to the diet. I always say every day you want to try and get a red vegetable in you, an orange vegetable, a green vegetable, and a cruciferous vegetable. So we've got our cruciferous from the cabbage, and now we're getting our red vegetable. So if you don't want to stain your hands, you can always opt to wear gloves. So rich in antioxidants. Such a great addition to your diet. And it's a great way to use up seasonal produce. Okay, and then I'm just dicing that. Oh, so good. I love beets pickled or grated or julienne. We're actually going to use beets in the salad as well, so you'll be able to see different ways we can utilize beets. Okay. Beautiful. Give my hands a little wipe before they get stained. You want to be eating the rainbow as much as possible. I'm sure you've heard that term before or that saying before, and that's just referring to fruits and vegetables. You want to get them into as much as possible because they can contain the most amount of nutrients, and oftentimes if it's a fruit or a vegetable, it's also very, very, very high in fiber, which helps to regulate our blood sugar levels. You want to be making sure you're eating regularly every day to keep those blood sugar levels even. You don't want to not eat during the morning and then just eat a ton at night. That's not good for chronic disease prevention and management. Okay, I'm going to turn this over so you can actually see the color because it's looking so beautiful. Right? Can you see that? I wish you could smell it too. Keep that going. Wonderful. And then next up, we're going to be adding carrots, parsnips, and sweet potatoes. So we're getting our orange vegetables in there as well. They're very rich in beta carotene, which turns into vitamin A in our body, but it's also a very powerful antioxidant. Toss it in. Also adds a nice sweetness to the soup. Okay, and we're at a medium to high heat. Great. And so we're just going to let that soften just a little bit and tidy up here. Okay, so next up we're going to be adding a little bit of tomato paste. So this is another great way to add an oomph of flavor. Tomatoes, because they're acidic. So again, we're focusing on acids. So you could throw this under the acids category or the vinegars category, and we're going to add about 2 teaspoons. But you really want to make sure that you're cooking tomato paste out because sometimes it can have a tinny taste to it, so just making sure you're just cooking it through a little bit. Great. Beautiful. Such a beautiful color. Great. Okay. So next up we're going to add our stock. So stock was just all the prep that I did here. So any of the odds and ends I put into a pot, boiled it with some water, probably about 5 to 6 cups, and I let it boil or simmer. Came to a boil first and then simmer for about 45 minutes, and then I just strained out all the goods. I also threw in a bay leaf, a parsley stem, as well as a stem of thyme. With that said, another good way to add an oomph of flavor to things like soups or stews, a spice bag. So, traditionally in spice bags, we have a bay leaf, we have stems, or even the entire sprig of thyme is good, and then parsley stems. So don't throw out those parsley stems if you're using parsley. Keep the stems, and then you can utilize them in things like soups. And again, it gives it extra flavor. You can put all of this into a cheesecloth and tie it with a little string, and then pop it in, and then you can just take it out after the stew's finished. I'm just going to put it right in, and then I'll just pick it out after. You can do that as well. Just want to really make sure that you're getting that bay leaf out at the very end. Okay. Great. Okay, great. And so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna let this simmer and we're gonna move on to the next recipe. So while this is simmering and all the flavors are melding together, we'll work on the salad next. Okay, so winter coleslaw. Obviously with coleslaw you have to have cabbage. So we've got some green cabbage. You could throw some red cabbage in here, or kale, or whatever cruciferous vegetables you have in the fridge. This recipe does not discriminate with cruciferous vegetables, so get those in there. Okay, so we've got our cabbage, check. This is the best because this salad has like a sweet, acidic, and then like a crunchy texture to it. So it's so nice. It's very well balanced in terms of flavor, but also in terms of textures too. Okay, so we've got some Bartlett pears. Make sure they're ripe because you want them to be sweet. Alright, so pears, obviously very rich in fiber, but also just have such a nice sweetness as well. And you can cut them however you like. The recipe calls for them to be julienned, but you don't need to do that if you're not feeling it. And then we'll put those in. Okay. Chop, 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 chop. Watch your fingers. So utilizing fruit for natural sweetness is such a great way, again, to add additional flavor, but also additional fiber as well. Fruit is such a great little snack, but it's always good to pair it with maybe a protein so that your blood sugar levels don't spike. Okay, so I've got a red beet and I've also got a golden beet. So I'm going to use the golden beet, but either or is great. I find the golden beet is a little less earthy in taste than the red beet, but it's not necessarily as sweet. So we'll take the heel off. Obviously make sure that it's very well washed. Bring this up here for just this time. Okay. You can peel the skins or you can leave them on if you've given them a good scrub. Skins add additional fiber and it's a little easier too. See how bright and beautiful that is? Okay, so I am going to do some kind of matchsticks here. You could use a grater. If you didn't want to do this, you could just grate these and that's easy. See how beautiful that turned out. Nice. Toss that in. Beautiful, so beautiful, so colorful. Again, we're eating the rainbow. Next up, we're gonna do red onion. So again, adding onion. And we're only gonna use a little bit. And you can omit the onions if you're not into onions, but again, it does add a nice flavor and a nice texture, a nice crunch without added salt, fat, or sugar. Turning it very beautiful. Okay, so we've got the main ingredients or the base of the salad. Now we're gonna work on the dressing. So I always, when I'm making dressings, I like to utilize a mason jar. That way you can just put the lid on and then shake, 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 shake. Ooh, those onions. Couple tricks. If your onions are very potent, you can wash your knife under cold water frequently between cuts. You could put the onion in the freezer for a little bit. You can soak the onion if you cut it in half and soak it in really cold water for about a half an hour. That will also take out some of the potency. Or you could wear some goggles. That actually works. Obviously, people who have contacts or glasses often find that cutting onions doesn't bother them as much. Okay, for our dressing, an orange vinaigrette dressing is what we're doing right now. So again, we're using the zest. So one of the hot tips. Now, orange zest is great in muffins, cakes, cookies, also dressings, obviously. Just make sure that your fruit is obviously very well cleaned before you use the zest. Okay, next up. Okay. And you can use just your hands, a reamer, or a spoon. Use a spoon for mine. We just don't want any seeds. Thankfully, this one's pretty seedless. And it's very juicy. So the recipe calls for 1 full orange, but this one is quite juicy. So I'm just gonna use half. And then next up, we're gonna add a little bit of maple syrup. We're gonna add some Dijon mustard. We're going to add some olive oil. So that was about 3 tablespoons. And we're gonna add some apple cider vinegar. So again, getting the vinegar in there as well as the orange juice and zest. So that's about 3 tablespoons. Oh, so the oil was about 2 tablespoons and the vinegar was 3 tablespoons. Okay, great. Good, and then we're gonna add our salt, which was about a half teaspoon. And we're just gonna shake that up with the lid on. You could throw some garlic in here too. If you were making this ahead of time, you would not want to put the garlic in. Garlic and oil, if left in the fridge for more than 2 days, can cause food poisoning. So you want to make sure that any dressings and stuff like that, if you're going to be making it the day before or 2 days even before, that the dressing does not have oil and garlic at the same time. Okay, isn't that a beautiful color too? And this salad would be perfect to make for a holiday gathering, especially around the winter time. Hazelnuts are so nice, especially with the cranberries. Okay, great, and then we're gonna chop up some parsley, so some fresh herbs, essentially. Saving our parsley stems. Those can be thrown into a stock bag and then tossed in the freezer, and you can utilize that for making stock as well. Okay, so parsley smells so fresh. It's also great at the end of the meal because it also helps with, if you have just a couple leaves after having some really garlicky or oniony things, it actually helps keeping your breath fresh. Okay, perfect. So you can see the salad there. And we're gonna hold off on the dressing. I'll add that at the very, very end. Now, on to the ginger, lemon, and mint slushy. So this is a great treat for a very hot day, or if you're wanting to have a sweet fix in lieu of, say, something like ice cream or really, really high sugar-based desserts. It's a nice addition to your dessert repertoire. Okay, great. So you just need a blender for this. It doesn't have to be a high-powered blender like this one. You can use just any old regular blender will do. Okay, so we have about 2.5 cups of ice. Just make sure your blender can handle ice, that's the only thing. I let the ice sit for about a half an hour just to melt a little bit so it's not quite as firm. We have 3 tablespoons of maple syrup. So this will make 3 servings. Okay, some water. Have about 1.5 cups there. And then about 1.5 cups of fresh mint. Great, and then of course, lemon. So lemon, again, we're using the zest and the juice. Before I do that, I always like to roll it on the table. That gets the juices flowing and makes it a lot easier to extract the juice from it. Okay, washed. We have our rasp. I like to call this my flavor enhancer because you can puree garlic or ginger, and you can also zest citrus. So it's a good investment. I think they're $10 to $15. Really, my only tools, I say, are a rasp, a knife, and a cutting board. And now we're going to cut in half, and so this lemon doesn't have very many seeds. I can see 1, 2. Good idea to do it over a strainer or into a cup beforehand, and then make sure that all the seeds have been removed. We do not want seeds in our slushy. Obviously, we're adding a boost of vitamin C as well. And then next up, I have probably the biggest piece of ginger you've ever seen in your life. It's very kind of tuber-like. We're just going to use a little knob. So I'm just going to break off a knob. Okay, and what I do to get rid of the skin, you could leave the skin on, but it sometimes is a little bit tastes too fibrous or has too much of a fiber texture. So I generally like to take the skin off. So all you need to get the skin off is a spoon, and you just peel it. And this is the easiest way to get the skin off, but it also maximizes how much ginger you save. If you use a knife, oftentimes you cut too much of it off and you lose a lot of the ginger. Great, and then you just pop it in. Because if your blender maybe isn't as powerful, you could chop it up just a little bit or slice it and then put it in, but it should be fine, to be honest. Okay, so now we're gonna zhuzh it up on here. It's gonna be quite loud, so talk amongst yourselves. Have a look at my son's art, the cookbook, my fruit basket. That is actually what I keep in my fruit basket. It's not staged, I promise. So not your typical slushy that you'd pick up at the 7-Eleven. A little better in my opinion, but obviously I'm biased. Put a little sprig of mint on top. Voila. Cheers! You have to taste it, of course. Oh, so refreshing. A little bit tart, but also a little bit sweet. Feels so nice on your throat too. How are you doing? Oh, beautiful. You can see that steam. Oh, smells so lovely. Has a beautiful color too. Our vegetables are fork tender, so we're going to move on. So next in the recipe, we have our kidney beans, so we'll put those in. We have salt and black pepper. So I like to add the salt at the end because it stays kind of predominant, whereas if you add the salt earlier on, it kind of dissipates and you don't taste it as much if you add it earlier on in the recipe. Okay, great. And of course, citrus. Okay, so we're just gonna zest a little bit of lemon. And you don't want to go too far down. Okay, once you've got one layer off, that's it, move on. Don't get down to that white stuff. That stuff is bitter and it doesn't add a nice flavor. So just the top layer of the zest is what you're looking for. Okay, great. Roll, roll, roll. Slice. Make sure we're not getting any seeds in there. Lovely, lovely, lovely. No seed surprises. We don't want those. Okay. Yum. Okay, and at this point, you can puree it. And what you will do is, or you could just leave it too, if you didn't have a hand immersion blender or if you didn't feel safe putting it into a blender, you can 100% just leave it there and serve it as is. I am going to blend it, just so you can see that bright, beautiful purple color. Okay. So these are great. I used this in university when I didn't have a blender. You can actually make smoothies and they aren't very expensive either, about $20. Get them at your local kitchen store, online. And it's a lot safer to do this using a hand immersion blender because you're not getting, necessarily maybe a splashback. With the blender, if you have it covered, you want to make sure you're taking the centerpiece out because it can create a vacuum that can then explode. And that's dangerous, obviously, if you're doing it with soups and stews. So that's why I try to use the hand immersion blender as much as possible. It's also easy to clean. Okay, so this is a good time to do it away from you. My white skirt. See that? And now we're going to serve it up. But first, the garnish. So a little bit of parsley, a little bit of dill. Now, if you were serving this right away, you could chop all of the dill and all the parsley and put it in, and just maybe save a little bit for garnish. But if you're making this ahead for your week, Make sure that you keep the herbs out because you don't want them to get kind of limp and brown by day 2 or day 3. So I'm gonna leave them out of the actual bowl here, or the stock pot, but I am gonna garnish with them. Okay, beautiful. Ladle. And we're gonna put a dollop of yogurt on top. So this is a non-dairy yogurt. This one's a pea and coconut based one, unsweetened of course. If you use a sweetened one, it won't be the same, so make sure that the yogurt is unsweetened. Yogurt too, if it's unsweetened, also acts as kind of an acid. So there we go, I'm gonna toss a few more on top of there. Borscht. Utilizing all sorts of winter vegetables. We're using fresh herbs, a little bit of yogurt on top to again, enhance the flavors that already exist. And we top with our dressing just before service. So there you have it, 3 very easy recipes that you can make yourself at home, utilizing those 5 hot tips that I gave you for increasing flavor in your favorite foods. So remember, when we're talking about, or you're thinking about increasing flavor, don't necessarily reach for the salt shaker just yet. Think about using things like spices and dried herbs, citrus or citrus zest, ginger and garlic, as well as vinegars and fresh herbs. So reach for those first before you reach for your salt shaker. Okay, thank you so much for joining me today, and bon appetit!